no one has said it better than Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank fame. Here it is.
104% tariffs in China are not enough. I'm advocating 400%. I do business in China. They don't play by the rules. They've been in the WTO for decades. They have never abided by any of the rules they agreed to when they came in for decades. They cheat, they steal IP. I can't litigate in their courts. They take product, technology, they steal it, they manufacture it, and sell it back here. Never has an administration.
400% tariffs? What would that look like?
I want Xi on an airplane to Washington to level the playing field. This is not about tariffs anymore. Nobody has taken on China yet, not the Europeans, no administration for decades. As someone who actually does business there, I've had enough. I speak for millions of Americans who have IP that have been stolen by the Chinese. I have nothing against the Chinese people. They brought great literacy, art, and tech to the world. The government cheats and steals, and finally, an administration, you may not like Trump, you may not like his style or his rhetoric, finally, an administration that puts up and says enough. 400% tariffs tomorrow morning. He'll tell you why. Xi can only stay the supreme leader if people are employed. If we wipe out any business there, because we are still 39% of all consumables on Earth and 25% of the world's GDP, America is the #1 economy on Earth with all the cards. We will not have that forever. It's time to squeeze Chinese heads into the wall now.
Well, hold on.
Whew. What an image.
There you get it. That's why, just hoping that we can have a nice little negotiation with China is just simply not going to work. You need to play hardball with these guys. And they're hoping to, by dumping treasuries and making the bond yield go up and make it more expensive for us to refinance our debt, they're hoping that we'll cry uncle and we'll give in. And Chinese are thought to be, we play the long game and we'll sit this out and we'll wait out the Americans. And that's why Trump has got to be strong on this. And
yeah, my thought is, we're pushing the crisis to a breaking point. And with this kind of warfare, not just in trade wars, in any kind of war, if you're going to push the crisis to the breaking point, to a place where decisions have to be made and changes have to be made, you've got to push it all the way. Because it makes me very nervous. But if you're going to act decisively and go for the gold, that's literally go for the gold.
But it's just, again, like the slave wages, they're gutting the market with cheap goods by using slave wages. And then, as he said, they're also stealing intellectual property. So like you come up with an idea and you have a factory in China produce the widget for you. Then they go, oh, okay, cool. And they let that secret.
They copy the plans, right?
10, 15 other people. And then all of a sudden, like, wait a minute, what? Now you're flooding the market with something I invented.
Well, it's not just happening. It doesn't just happen in manufacturing either. My husband his training is in Research One University, science, neuroscience, and in the scientific community as well. There is a huge issue with Chinese students who, some of them are really under the gun. They come over here to study and they are watched by the communist government night and day. Their emails and they're expected to steal the work of scientists from other countries. So it happens in the sciences, it happens in manufacturing. And of course, like you said, Josh, they run on a slave economy. This is not... There's no such thing as fair trade with China because it's not a fair trade country within its own borders. Yeah. So like I said, I hate to, it makes me very nervous. Any kind of war is terrible, but I'm with Mr. Wonderful on this one. If you're going to do it, you got to do it big.
I much rather would wage war with not consuming cheap plastic stuff from China than with bullets and guns.
Amen to that, brother.
Yeah. And I do think that this is kind of becoming more clear to me that the global tariff regime, whether it seems chaotic or whatever, I think is actually addressing the final solution of taking on China. And just the more that I dig into, and it is funny to see some journalists really, I think we're about a week away from seeing Chinese flags in certain journalists' bios. Because like
your filter on Facebook. Yeah.
I'll give you guys a few examples in case you're not aware. I think everyone kind of intuits that the CCP has been unfair, but they are by far the worst global polluter. So in terms of environmental, it's not even close. They dump everywhere. They are terrible in terms of if you're concerned about climate change or whatever. They're large thieves of IP and copyright laws we brought up. They subsidize their industries way past WTO limits. I mean, I've talked to guys who used to be in the steel industry in America, gone. In the 90s, when we opened that up, there's no way for American steel to compete with these subsidized industries in China, intentionally to get other places hooked on their cheap steel so that they could raise the prices. There's no legal structure in China. Like Mr. Wonderful was saying, you can't litigate these problems. It's super authoritarian. Also, this is going to hit such a narrow niche of the audience. Hopefully someone will get this. It's actually literally the plot of Black Ops 2 if you swap in trade war with cyber attack. And it actually...
This is where I zone out. You go for it, Pogo.
So Black Ops 2, the campaign... it was over rare earth minerals in China. Someone pointed this out over Twitter, and it's like the perfect use for X. Just like stuff that 1%, maybe less than 1% would understand. It also happened in the year 2025. So listen, a little bit Simpsons-like. This escalation was called by Black Ops 2 back in my middle school days.
Game or something?
The video game, yes, Call of Duty. So moving on to more serious topics. Apple. So I was looking at, like I said, these journalists are like, oh my gosh, how are we going to afford iPhones? Forbes wrote an article saying that iPhones could go in the 30,000 to 100,000 range. And no, this is not a typo. In fact, if Apple were forced to solely manufacture the iPhone in America, there's a good argument that it would not be able to manufacture any at all. And if could somehow successfully make the manufacturing transition, capacity would likely be constrained to just a few million units per year. Yeah. You know what I say to that? Boo freaking who?
You have to buy it and build it in America. We're not.
No one's saying that. I would just like for them not to, like Foxconn's a great example of using Uyghur slaves to manufacture their things. 100 hours of overtime per month, 14-year-olds employed at MacBook factories, $2 an hour wages. I mean, this is like
the nets, to prevent workers from committing suicide by jumping off the top of the building.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's like,
that's actually, we don't want people to commit suicide. I mean, granted,
we like the nets there, but the fact need
why is it that they're wanting to jump off a building?
Right.
And I've seen serious analysis of this, and they're like, oh, now Apple will have to temporarily source more iPhones from India because the tariff is about a quarter of what we would be hitting with China, and that's increasing as of the day. Great. It kind of goes back to my point on.
That's the point.
I was watching an ARC debate, and the free trade people are like, we are going to rely on the patriotic instincts of our business leaders here in Australia to not buy from China. When Apple, one of the largest companies in the world, has literally operated off of slave labor until they get exposed barely, and then they do nothing about it. Right. So it's like, I'm not going to pretend like these business leaders are these, moral theologian, great patriots that would never do this. They have been doing it for years. And it's almost like this is the exact thing that needs to happen to get people off the drug of cheap labor and actually operating with some type of solidarity to the human existence. Go ahead, Erica.
Right. Yeah. And this is another point. So when you see the Forbes headlines like that, it's why iPhone's going to cost $30,000 to $100,000. Those analyses, so-called, it's such a scare clickbait tactic because what they don't take into account, not only the whole moral, we're living off slave labor, and that is a problem that you'd think the left and especially the Catholic left would get on board with, but that also doesn't take into account the fact of human ingenuity and creativity. Apple is not just they're not going to just keep operating the same way and be like, okay, we move everything to the United States and we put $100,000 price tag on this. No, we figure stuff out. Adaptation is what makes us the greatest species on earth, other than the whole dignity and image of God thing, right? But we can adapt. And will it take time? Yes. Will prices go up? Yes. But in the end, it could be so much better. Apple's
why do prices go up? If they go up because we're no longer using slave labor, then they shouldn't have been this low to begin with.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
If I had to say I could have never held an iPhone in my hand, but I would know that we're not using slaves to build them, then I'd be okay with no iPhones. Is that even a crazy?
Put me down for the no slavery category.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
On the 160th anniversary of the signing of the end of the Civil War in Appomattox.
Ah, man.
Oh my gosh. For those who celebrate, I do.
Some make the connection between Black Ops 2 and what's going on right now. Some make the connection between the freeing of the slaves. So
yep. I have another connection. You ever see Apollo 13? You see that movie? Apollo 13, right? Great movie, right?
Wait.
Tom Hanks at his best because he wasn't talking politics. He was just acting. Good job.
You're talking about the film that was made of us being on the moon?
Yeah, right.
No, they didn't make it to the moon in this movie.
Because the thing, oh my gosh, Pogo, this is embarrassing. Apollo 13, there's the scene, right?
For who?
Where the CO2 filter goes out. It explodes. And the CO2 levels are climbing. The astronauts don't know what to do. They don't have another filter because they didn't plan for this disaster. They didn't plan to be in space this long. Mm-hmm. So the guys down in Houston, Texas, what do? They get replicas of everything that is on that plane. They dump it all. Yeah. They put it all on the table and they're like, use this to build a filter. So they're ripping up manuals. They're using the duct tape and they do it. They build a filter. That is what Apple and all these other companies are going to have to do, where you say, okay, we're taking you out of the slave labor. You have no filter. You just have to figure it out. Here's what we have in the United States. Here's what we have with other countries. Here's all the tariffs. Now figure it out. And you know what? Humans can do that.
That's actually government at its best. We're not going to dictate how everything's done, but we're not going to let you use slaves. Pretty simple.
That sounds a lot like Apple.
I drink to that. Cheers. Hey, if you like that clip, you definitely like the full show. We tackle the biggest headlines in news, culture, and politics live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Hit that subscribe button now, and we'll see you then. Thanks for supporting the show.